22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus. Today, what state lawmakers are doing to find permanent housing for the homeless. Here's Barry Krieger.
And good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Barry Krieger. For years, 22 News has been reporting about homeless families living in hotels across the state, including right here in Western Massachusetts. The state has said it is too expensive, and they are making changes in an effort to get the homeless out of the hotels and into more permanent housing. This week on 22 News in Focus, the Deputy Undersecretary of the State Department of Housing and Community Development will talk to us about what they're doing to curb this problem and tell us if they're moving in the right direction. He will also tell us about a plan to phase out all homeless in hotels by June of next year. Also, we will hear from the Chief Operating Officer of Springfield's HAP Housing about how they are helping the state and what they and the community can do to help out as well. Joining us now, we have Deputy Undersecretary Arthur Jemison. Mr. Jemison, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, we're just trying to make the situation clearer. Now, can you tell me why having the homeless living in hotels is a less than optimal, even a bad idea?
Well, first of all, living in a motel is not a great situation for a family. The facilities there are quite limited. Often families that are living in motels are separated from schools or home, family, other things that make a community and a neighborhood work.
How does somebody end up in this situation where they're homeless and end up through the state living in a hotel or a motel?
Well, what's happened is because of the economy and other factors, we've had all of the shelter facilities available in the state, frankly, oversubscribed. And so motels serve as a temporary option for us when we need to make sure families are going to be housed overnight. Unfortunately, it's become a significant number of motel rooms have had to be used in order to do that.
And it's become something less than temporary or more than temporary as well.
Exactly.
It's become a living situation for a lot of these families. And this is not a cheap route to take. I mean, it's much cheaper, I think, to have an apartment than live in a hotel for a month.
Not only is it not good for families, it's not a cost-effective solution to the problem, which is why Patrick Murray administration has undertaken a series of reforms, not only of the EA system, but also making significant investments in new permanent affordable housing and other resources that can help families avoid entering shelter. It's a series of programs I can talk to you about in a couple minutes now.
All right. I mean, we were talking that it's quite costly. How costly is it for the state?
It can be almost $36,000 a year per family to house a family in a hotel.
And that's just the housing. I mean, and there's a lot of attendant expenses as well when someone is living homeless or generally. Now, when we run a story about the homeless and living in hotels, we get calls from landlords who say they'd like to help. They have units empty. They're available, but no one contacts them. How can we put them and you in touch, or is that even appropriate?
Well, what we've been trying to do through the reforms are through programs like RAFT, which is a program for families with low or extremely low incomes who are at the most risk for homelessness. They can come to us through our DTA offices, and they can get up to $4,000 worth of benefit that could help them, relocate, first-class security, even moving expenses. That's a way that landlords can participate. The critical thing, though, is making sure that the counseling that the families are getting that comes along with the resource is something that they can make wise decisions about where they're going to move and whether they can maintain rents over time.
All right. So if these people, what do these people have to do? Are you looking for places to permanently place homeless families, people that are in homeless, that are in the hotel, trying to transition them into more permanent housing? If a landlord has these open spaces or open apartment units, are they eligible, or what is the process they have to undergo in order to get involved?
The landlords or the tenants who might be...
The landlords.
Okay. The landlords should, for example, we're going to have Ellen join us in a few minutes from HAP. She can tell you a lot more about landlords. She's got a great network of landlords that we frankly depend on to make sure that families have places to relocate to when they leave shelter.
All right. Now, when someone lives in a hotel, obviously this is not an optimal situation, but it's way better than being on the streets.
Absolutely.
And what's happening is that this is actually becoming something of an attractive situation for homeless people who are living out of state. Are you seeing that more and more people are coming from out of state to get placed in hotels here in Massachusetts?
Well, actually, one of the reforms that we implemented when they just went into effect in December, we had worked with the legislature, all of our advocates in the community, and housing authorities, large number of stakeholders to identify a series of reforms. One of them was to make sure that you had to be an in-state resident in order to take advantage of the program, Home Base or Raft or any of the other programs. You're not going to find families that haven't been able to identify themselves as residents of Massachusetts according to the rules living in the hotels.
Okay, so this is not a form of abuse that you're seeing?
No, we're not seeing abuse.
All right, well, that's good to know. What's the state doing to end the situation? I know you have a goal where you want to keep people out of the hotels by the June of next year, by following summer. What are you doing to make sure that happens?
Well, Patrick Murray administration has been making, frankly, historic investments in not only the resources to prevent homelessness, but also resources to develop new permanent housing. So I may have mentioned earlier, we've got a program called Raft, which is designed to help those low and extremely low income families.
What does Raft stand for?
Raft stands for Rental Assistance for Families in Transition.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No problem. No. Raft stands for Rental Assistance for Families in Transition.
All right.
And what it makes available to families is up to $4,000, as I mentioned, so they can pay for first, last security or maybe pay for moving. I have another program called Home-Based Household Assistance. This is to prevent families from entering shelter. So if you're at imminent risk of homelessness, you might have to go into a shelter tonight. This is a resource that you can use potentially to make emergency payments on rent, make emergency payments on utilities, other things that might keep you where you're living now. It can also be used, and this is a recent change we made in the, as I mentioned, emergency assistance regulations. You can use home-based to leave shelter as well. You can take the $4,000 benefit and use it to pay rent, potentially with, maybe you have to pay rent to your grandmother. Maybe you have to pay rent to with a cousin in a joint co-housing situation. These are the ways that things we've been using to get people out of motels. I should mention one other thing. There are certain instances where it's important for us to make sure that a family has a long-term benefit, a long-term resource that supports their rent. And in that instance, we've got a program called MRVP, which is an example, I think, of the Patrick Murray administration's view of this matter. MRVP is a program that we haven't, frankly, had any new vouchers. It's like a Section 8 voucher. It supports your rent. We haven't had any new vouchers in the Commonwealth since the 1980s. And having these voucher resource available for use in an appropriate way to move people out of motels has been part of the mix and the balance of things we've used to empty the hotels. I should mention we've made a lot of progress. We've had, in November, we had 1,800 families living in motels around the state. And if you imagine the amount of disruption each one of those families is experiencing as part of that, we've been able to get that number down to 1,597 just yesterday. And it's a combination of people taking home base to leave, people taking home base before they come into shelter, and on occasion, use of MRVP for families that are in significant need.
It sounds like it's pretty comprehensive, and you are making progress. This is a good thing, and we're going to put it on hold right now for a moment, and we'll talk about how HAP Housing in Springfield is helping the state to reduce the number of homeless people in Massachusetts. That's right after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we are talking about homeless families living in hotels here in Massachusetts, and we're talking about how much it's costing the state and what's being done to phase the program out. We are continuing our conversation now with Deputy Undersecretary Arthur Jemison from the Department of Housing and Community Development. And also joining us now we have Ellen Hadzakis, Chief Operating Officer at HAP Housing in Springfield. Thank you again both for being here.
Happy to do it.
Ellen, let me ask you, what does HAP do?
Okay. Well, HAP is one of the largest regional affordable housing providers in Massachusetts, and we're very happy to have a very strong partnership with the state. And at this time, in particular with this program, we are trying to match services and housing. So we're connecting people to local resources. We're also very interested in trying to help with the effort to reduce the amount of families that have to struggle with surviving in the motel setting. So we're very much involved now in a rehousing effort with the state.
All right. Now, is HAP involved in this deadline of June of 2014 to end this practice of putting the homeless in hotels?
We're committed to helping the state meet the goal. we're going to do everything in our power, and we've had quite a bit of success right now in Western Massachusetts in reducing the numbers of families that have to live in hotels. We're very happy to
Tell me a little
report.
bit about that, the success that you're seeing. What's happening?
We've been very fortunate to have the state support us in increasing the amount of staff that can go into the hotels and work very directly with the households, assessing their needs, determining a little more history, assessing and evaluating what got them there, and then coming up with a housing plan with them so we can look at what it would take to rehouse the households. We do some work with assessing their work readiness, looking at their employment history, looking at their education, and we support every effort to increase their income, because quite often how we find people in these situations is they've had job loss, they've had medical conditions, things that suddenly occur. Domestic violence, unfortunately, is a very big cause of why people find themselves in the motels, and we work to piece their lives back together.
And this
with
is whole
them.
families, too. This is
That's right.
People with children that end up in these hotels.
You're not going to be in our program unless there are children involved. This program is about keeping children safe and giving them a secure place to live. It's our belief that until they have a secure place to live, they can't really rebuild their lives. So housing is the important underpinning of all of this.
All right, we're trying to move people from these hotels, people who were formerly homeless, into hotels and into permanent housing.
Right.
That's right.
I was asking Arthur just before the break that we hear from landlords after we run these stories that say they have units available, but they don't know whom to turn to, or that no one contacts them. You said you sort of have an answer for that.
Oh, please, please. We are so happy to hear that landlords have units that are available. We have a landlord listing service. I would direct any landlord to our website, which is www.haphousing.org as a nonprofit.
All right, and we'll get that on our website too, so people can find it easily.
We would list their apartment. We have staff that would work directly with them, assessing the viability of matching any available units to our families. We're thrilled to have any property owner, any large complex owner work with us. We have a very strong network in our community of owners, and we can certainly give them good references as well for our programs.
Now, how can we get everybody involved? I mean, this is very expensive, as you had pointed out earlier. It's more efficient, I guess, to have people in permanent housing, right?
It absolutely is. You know, the cost that the $30,000 I mentioned earlier, when you think about how much that adds up to, when you think about 1,800 families, we spent about $45 million last year on motels. With that amount of money, we could finance a large number of units. DHCD also has the role of funding through tax credits and state bond funds and other dollars. New affordable housing around the state. It's what we call the rental round. I've got at least 2,000 units that have been proposed for development, many of which are right here in this region, that with that same $45 million, I could finance almost all of them using the leverage that comes from low-income housing tax credits and other resources. So what's really great about this effort, I think, is that we've been able to really shift the focus. Patrick Murray administration's been focused on this idea of housing first, which means that if you can make sure you're serving those who need it the most, and HAP is a critical partner in doing that, and you can help them with flexible resources of the kind, home base and wrap, that have been described earlier, you can actually save money on the motels, and then you can reinvest that money in the things that make families stronger and the things that allow us to develop more affordable housing around the state.
So you're working on these overall solutions to the problem, but right now the state is funding these people in hotels and motels, and HAP Housing is helping to transition them from the hotels into permanent housing. How's this working for both of you?
I have to say, HAP is one of a number of partners we have around the state. HAP, under the leadership of Peter Gagliardi and Ellen, have been doing an amazing job for us. Just this past 3 months, we've gone from having just this past, I'm sorry, just make sure I get it right. Just this past fiscal year, we've gone from having 500 people living in motels in this area down to 367 families. That's a 28% decrease. They've been a critical part of making that happen. It's a decrease we're hoping to see all around the state, and we're starting to see those results.
I would just like to say you're welcome and thank you for the resources, but also give credit to our other local partners. We work very closely with the Center for CHD, Center for
Human Development.
Thank you very much,
I work with those guys myself.
As well, we're working with the New England Farm Workers. So we have a team of people that we've been sending to the motels to work with the families. And the landlord community has been very responsive. There's two more things I think I would really like to emphasize that would allow for these solutions to be more permanent besides the expansion of more affordable housing units, and that is that our families need jobs.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
if there are employers that can partner with us and are also all our workforce development programs, they're critical.
It all boils
Child
down
care
to jobs.
too.
We all need jobs.
Yes, that's right. That's at the core of this. And we also need to be sure that all the child care facilities, and if there is any further assistance in coordinating those services, providing child care vouchers for these families so they can work, that's critical. HAP also has a program that I would love to ask people in the community to help us with.
We're going to get to that in the next segment.
Oh, great.
We're going to take a break. I want you guys to stay right here for the moment, and we will continue this conversation right after the break. Stay with us. You are watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. If you are just joining us now, we are talking about homeless families living in hotels and what the state is doing to phase this program out. We are continuing our conversation now with Deputy Undersecretary Arthur Jemison from the Department of Housing and Community Development. And also with us is Ellen Hazakis, Chief Operating Officer at HAP Housing in Springfield. Thank you once again both for being here with us today. Now, we talked earlier about setting an end point for this program of having the homeless living in hotels. It's expensive for the state, and it's no fun for the families either. Everybody would much rather have either a house or an apartment to live in. What is the state doing, what is HAP Housing doing to bring this to a close, to get people out of these hotels?
Well, first we're using some of the rental resources I talked about before, like MRVP in some instances, which is like a Section 8 voucher for a family to help support their rent. We're also using Home Base, which is a program that allows us to say to a family in shelter, here's a flexible resource that's worth about $4,000. You can use it to lease a new apartment, moving expenses, maybe it's transportation that's an impediment for them getting a job. That's another program that they can use. And finally, to sort of prevent people from coming to the front door, because to a great degree, the solution to the problem is about reducing shelter entries as well as
attacking the problem before it becomes a bigger problem.
And then also helping people get leave shelters and helping them get out of shelters and get out of motels. So we've got a resource to help them in the front, which is RAFT, and we've got a resource to help them get out or prevent an imminent entry, which is called Home Base.
Now, you had said earlier that you've already seen some pretty good progress in the past year. What can we expect to see happen in the coming year?
Well, we got to continue this process. So we have to continue using the same discipline at the front door, which was made available through the emergency assistance reforms that basically took hold in December. They were negotiated with the legislature, all of our homeless advocates who support us and help us in the process of identifying and working with homeless families. And out of that came something that keeps the safety net in the Commonwealth one of the strongest in the whole country, but also make sure that really the families that need it the most are getting the most intensive service. That allows us to reserve money and invest it in permanent housing and homelessness prevention.
The state's very actively involved, and this is a good thing. I mean, it's one thing for people to care, it's another thing for people to do. What can families in need do to receive assistance? How can they avail themselves of HAP Housing?
Families in need.
The people who want to transition from the hotels to to permanent housing.
We have an agreement with the state where we're actually going to the motels and assessing all these families. They should be connected to us. And also with our partners, we are the administrators of our emergency shelters in the area. So we have a very close collaboration, and all the families should already be connected to these services.
All right, how can the community help? How can people get involved?
Well, if there are, as I was saying earlier, if there are any available rental units, we want to know about them if people would contact us. If there is anybody that can help with employment opportunities and or additional provision of child care services. But most importantly, we find when we are successful working with the family, the unfortunate circumstance that we have is that we can find them a unit, help them move there, and they don't have furniture and household essentials. So HAP started a program where we ask folks in the community, if you have a tag sale, if you're moving, you're getting new furniture, please contact us. We would love to pick up your gently used furniture and make sure that a family has a bed, has a kitchen table.
It's so much more than just first month, last month security deposit.
Right.
Then you have to fill the house.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
And everything costs money.
It does.
Everything costs money. On the topic of housing, talk to us about legislation that the governor's filed to strengthen the state's housing authorities.
Well, this is very important. The governor, Patrick Berry administration, filed legislation just last week to implement a significant reform among our housing authorities. Now, we have 242 housing authorities around the state, which means that both communities, very large, very small, all of them have housing authorities. And what we've found is that we're really not able to achieve the level of efficiency, level of professionalism that it takes to run a solid housing authority. So what we've tried to do is create 6 regional housing authorities, and we're proposing to bring all the property management into those housing authorities, as well as the capital improvement management, so the purchasing and construction that improves the units in the portfolio. This leaves significant role for local communities as well. If there's going to be significant disposition of property, sale of property owned by a housing authority, or if there's going to be a significant reduction or increase in the number of units, they'll still have a say over that. But what it allows us to do is attract the very best professionals to lead and be the CFO and be the property manager of housing authority properties, which frankly are in the kind of shape that they need the very best attention.
All right, well, there's a lot happening, and there's a lot in the pipeline, as we would say, in order to help alleviate this problem.
Absolutely.
All right, I want to thank you both for being with us today. We will have a few final words after the break. You are watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We have spent this half hour talking about homeless families living in hotels across Massachusetts and transitioning them, and what the state and HAP Housing in Springfield are doing to transition them into permanent housing. That is our program for today. If you missed any of it, you can always watch it online on our website at WWLP.com. From all of us here at 22 News, have a wonderful Sunday.